Well, shalom again, YouTubers. This time I just want to try to discuss politics a little bit. Now Scotland, I think, is voting for independence this September, but what is not being explained to the voters is there is not true independence because the British Treasury, will still take care of the actual finance. Okay, so to be truly independent, a country has to have a gold standard, and that's what obviously the Americans had before, I believe, Eisenhower, or before that, pre-1930s, around the First World War. I believe that America were basically trading with their own gold standard. They had their own currency, and everything was fine until this Federal Reserve thing came through, and obviously there was some victories that the American presidents had over the bankers, and but largely what actually happened was that America again became slaves to the bankers. Now, what is not really explained is that when Germany became National Socialist, okay, back in 1933, I think it was, basically what wasn't explained to them is that there was another power controlling them, and that power was actually the very tip of the German Reich, the actual German Empire, which it was basically Switzerland, was where they were getting their money from, where they were actually getting their, I guess, gold standard or their reserve banking from. You know, the bankers from Switzerland financed Adolf Hitler, okay, and Adolf Hitler was born in Austria, which is sort of the central part of the German Empire, the German-speaking people, okay. And if you really think about it, without Adolf Hitler, tens of millions of Germans wouldn't have lost their lives. They wouldn't have been deceived into thinking they could have a national country, Germany, independent country, when in fact they don't, because they actually rely on the Swiss bankers for their banking system, which actually I've explained before, is linked to Bavaria, which is and also Frankfurt, I believe, is a very, very big bank there. You can check that out, and that's basically where the Rothschilds were said to have started. The Rothschilds meaning the Red Shields, okay, which are actually believed very much to be Satanists, and that's why people like Albert Pike, which are in the same sort of what we'd say spiritual teachings as they have, you know, really prophesied about the three world wars. And if you actually check it out, you know, they couldn't have these three world wars without the Rothschilds. So the Rothschilds were very, very much the central players in world history the past 100 years. You know, ever since in Switzerland, what we actually had was a Zionist conference. I think it was about 1897, round about that. And basically what happened was that the Rothschilds were convinced, so-called convinced, as if they probably didn't know what was already going on. But what was said was that they actually accepted the plans to bring in a Jewish state, and these plans meant that they actually had to go to war against the main European power at that time. The two main European powers at that time were the British Empire and the German empires. And Albert Pike actually prophesied through probably the spirit of Satan or Lucifer that these two empires would have to go to war. And at the outcome of that war, basically World War I and World War II, it would actually bring about the establishment of the Jewish state we know as Israel today. So these things have been carefully planned. Adolf Hitler was friends with Jews, okay. He was actually very close friends with certain Jews, which is, again, these things are kept very hidden. I will leave a link to the Wikipedia and a couple of videos that I found on YouTube actually showing that Adolf Hitler was working for the Zionist or the Rothschild bankers, okay, based in Switzerland, based in Bavaria, based in London. The European bankers, the same bankers that, in fact, today Barack Obama is working for, even though he has close links, of course, to Saudi Arabia as well, and that he at least pretends to be a Muslim. But at the same time, how could any Muslim then go to a church and, I think it's Jeremiah Wright, the minister there, saying that Barack Obama is a Christian. So if it seems to be that it's all just a facade, it's all just a front, and the fact that it's really the bankers that are really pulling the strings, that are really making history again, just as they did in World War I and World War II. And what Albert Pike prophesied is that it's the elite of the Zionists versus the elite of the Muslims, in which the elite means that they're actually Masons. It's actually the higher-ranking Masons, and they're linked to the Jesuits as well. Okay, they're linked to the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church always plays a very much a spiritual role in what's going on today. And this new world order, this one world religion, okay, in which the Queen is even being seen in mosques, okay, and again I believe that this is a front, okay. We already know that the elite aren't real Christians, but how can we really then believe that they're true Muslims as well? The religion to them is just a front to make themselves look holy or look good in front of people, but basically they're being managed and financed, and that basically what's really going on behind the scenes is that these bankers are actually planning and controlling things and financing what is actually going on, and actually making money, of course, out of the wars that are actually happening. They don't care how to get rid of depleted uranium. They don't want to, for instance, fire it into space and maybe make some kind of moon base where you could put depleted uranium, where it would be thousands of miles away from Earth, and it wouldn't hurt anyone. But what they're actually doing is putting it into the weapons that is being used in the Iraq War, and it's causing all kind of illnesses. And it's a real crime. It's actually war crimes that has been going on the past few decades, and these people are really should be answerable to the war crimes that they've been putting depleted uranium into the weapons. And so if they're so holy, if they're so Muslim, then why are they doing it to their Muslim brothers? Why are they doing it to humanity? Because we know that the golden rule that Jesus Christ taught is that do unto others as you shall do to yourself. And these people are continually breaking that law. And basically what we have to do in the West is stand up and actually say, well, this new world order, it's not exclusively Muslim, it's not exclusively Zionist, it's not exclusively anything. What it is definitely, it's Masonic. That's what it is, because what you have is the ruling elite, imams in both the Catholic and Muslim religions being involved with the Masons at a high level, and actually being involved with the Catholic Church and the Jesuits as well. And these are the ones who are really controlling people, the way people view things, in which people tend to be very racist, people tend to be very biased, okay. And it was just the JFK's speeches that this ruling elite always appeal to the carnal nature of man. That's what Satan does. That's what Satan did to Eve in the Garden of Eden. She appealed to her carnal nature. That she appealed to her that she could be something more than God already made her. And this is basically all that people are trying to do today, is get gain, get position, get money, and become more than what they thought they were before. But then you look at the example of Jesus Christ, and he came as a poor carpenter. That God himself came as a poor carpenter to actually show people that there's nothing that you can attain in this life other than what God has given us. God has given us and made us in his image, and actually given us his Son now to redeem us from this corrupt very corrupt, deceitful world system. And it's only that when you're born again you can truly see how the mystery of iniquity is working in all these false religions, all these pagan religions, and how basically the entire system is all about financing the elite's own plans and what they want to bring about. And certainly said that they want to bring about fighting and a complete exhaustion of humanity, and for humanity just to basically just cry out and say there's no God because things are getting so bad that how can God allow all these wicked things to happen? That's what Satan really wants people to think and to say. And a lot of people have succumbed to that spirit. It's a spirit of unbelief. It's a spirit of lack of faith. It's a spirit of blaming other people for their own problems. And you can't really look at the Bible and study the Bible and say that there's any political system in the Bible that was used for any length of time. For example, Abraham, okay, when you look at the three main political systems, that you can bring about capitalism, you can bring about socialism, or you can bring about communism. And Abraham was a capitalist, okay. In other words, Abraham had servants. He didn't have slaves. He had servants that he treated them well. I'm sure he would have spent time with them all each day, probably in prayer in the morning and thanksgiving to God. And the fact that they would have known that they were all part of his family, so they weren't slaves in effect, that they were being used and abused. But Abraham was rich in the fact that what God gave him, if he needed money, he could sell things for a profit, and basically that's capitalism. It does say that about Abraham, that he bought low and sold high. It says that in the Old Testament. So that's why Abraham was very, very successful. He was very rich, and but he didn't make his money off of people or basically use people. What he did was that he lived life very sociably. Not using socialism as an example, of course, because true National Socialism, we'll come to that in a second, and the problems that causes in a nation. But what you've got to have for any of these things to work is a faith in God, okay? Because any of these systems can work as long as the people are godly and that they have Christ as the centre of that system, just as the apostles were actually in the first century church were all communists. Now, pastors have fallen out with me because I've actually told them that. But in the first century it said that the apostles said that everyone had to give everything that they had up voluntarily. It wasn't something that they had to do, but it was something that these apostles requested that they had to do. And the ones that did that, okay, it meant that the wealth could be redistributed to those that were in need. For instance, families that were in need, children that were in need, that were very poor. Okay, communism was used as the basis of the actual church itself. And as I said, pastors have fallen out with me over that and argued with me about that. But that is the fact. Okay, so in the Bible we both have capitalism, we have communism, but truly socialism is another animal altogether. Because what we have in Scotland, as I mentioned at the start of this video, is that we're all going to vote to see if Scotland's going to be independent. But again, it's not going to have true independence because it doesn't have a financial system. Now, all that can happen then is going to become National Socialist, just like Germany was in 1933. And all that's going to happen is that the true wealth creation power that was with this nation about 30 years ago, because it has the materials and the minerals to actually make anything it liked, steel, it had the coal industry. Basically, the wealth creation industries are something that you make something. But you actually notice that in the West, that most of the industries now, even clothes making, has went to Asia, either India or China or Taiwan or somewhere like that. So these wealth creation industries are actually in Asia just now. Okay, that's what true capitalism is, by the way. So if it goes National Socialist, the only thing you can do is sustain a nation, but it's going to get poorer and it's going to get poorer and poorer, and what will happen is that the interest rates will rise, inflation will rise, and the living standards will sorry, not the living standards, but the living costs will increase, just as they did in Russia, just as they did in Nazi Germany in the Second World War. So what you got to look at as the alternative is that, you know, Britain is not really being run as a true capitalist nation. It's definitely not being run as a communist nation, but what it is socialist. But the alternative you can have is the UK Independence Party, where you still have, largely in the United Kingdom, wealth creation industries that, yes, they've been taken away from Scotland since Margaret Thatcher took them away back in the early 80s. It also took a lot of industry away from Wales as well, but largely just totally raped Scotland of its wealth creation industries. And now it's going to be very hard for Scotland to be a successful independent nation unless it has its own gold-backed banking system, or it could use the barter system, where it could use, for instance, whiskey. You could use that to actually measure the wealth of the nation. Instead of gold, you could use whiskey, and that would work equally as well, because we have plenty of whiskey in Scotland. But to be truly independent, you'd have to do something like that, and also you'd have to build more wealth creation industries, which really, even the electronics industries, many industries being actually taken down to England, and if not overseas, as I mentioned before. So it's a very difficult choice. I still haven't made up my mind if I'm going to vote for Scotland to be more independent. It's not going to be complete independence, but it's going to be more independent than it is just now. So I'll think about that. I'll consider all the arguments, and it's very much up to the Scottish people to really understand that we're going to have to put an awful lot of work into this nation for it to be a successful nation again. And we're really going to have to start focusing on the Word of God as well, because without morality, a nation is not going to prosper, because it says this in Scripture. I know a lot of you don't believe in the Bible, but what it actually does say is that if a nation is sinful, then it's a blot in the face of all the nations, basically. It's not going to prosper, okay, if it's going to have things like gay marriage in it. And I'm being honest here. If you actually look at the economies of all the nations who have brought in gay marriage the past few decades, their economies have went down so much, and their living standards have went down so much, because the blessing of God is no longer there upon these nations. Okay, it's as simple as that. And what's going to really happen is that all these powers, the principalities and so on, they all just conspire anyway to destroy nations. So the only thing that we can have as Christians is a vigilance, is a faith in God, and is an understanding about, yes, economics, that you've got to have natural resources, you've got to have wealth creation industries, and you've also got to have a good financial system, an independent financial system, so that no outside body can inflict any tax upon you, which is one of Alex Salmond's main arguments. So anyway, hope you've enjoyed this video and learned something. May the Lord bless you, and thank you for listening.